Encounter number 1, Walker County, Alabama. In 1969, I was 9 years old and lived about a half a mile down the road from an old church and cemetery. There were 2 other old houses there no one lived in. There were strange things happening quite often around where we lived back then, and I remember one of the strange things that happened very well. My dad worked evenings from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., just 3 miles down the road from our house. My mom, sister, and I had just gone to bed when we started to hear a bumping sound on the back of our house. My sister and I ran from the bedroom we shared in the back of the house to the front of the house where Mom and Dad's bedroom was. My sister and I were scared, so Mom let us sleep with her until Dad came home at 11 that night. Their bedroom had 2 windows side by side on the front of the house above the porch. You could see through the curtains at night due to the street light out front. We were lying there after not hearing any more noise when all of a sudden we heard something on the front porch. Mom saw it first and sat up in bed. That made my sister and I notice her staring out the window. When we turned our gaze from Mom to the window, we saw what looked like a very large dog on the front porch. It was walking to the front door upright on its back legs. When it reached the front door, it shook it violently. It was as tall as the door, and we could see it scratching at the screen door with its front paws. It remained there for what seemed like 15 minutes, but it was probably only a minute or 2. Mom didn't say a word for the first minute or 2, but she just shushed us until it turned and walked about 10 feet to the steps on its back legs. Just before it reached to the steps and went down them, it went down on all 4 legs. Mom told us to go back to sleep, and we eventually did. I don't remember her telling my dad, but I do remember this well. It was 6 to 6.5 feet tall while standing upright on its back legs. You could see all of its facial features, its ears, snout, and its head. Those features made it resemble a German shepherd. We hadn't seen anything that looked or acted like that thing in the area before that night. A lot of strange things happened there. I can't say it was a Dogman, but it did walk on its back legs for several feet. Another time when I was young, my sister, who I shared the back bedroom with at the time, was at our grandma's house spending the night. I had gone to bed but wasn't asleep yet. Mom had my bedroom window open so air could get in, and it was hot that night. The back of our house was high off the ground. Consequently, the bottom of my bedroom window was 8 feet off the ground. I had been lying there on my back when I rolled over onto my stomach toward the window. My foot went off the bed on the window side and wound up being only a few inches from the window. All of a sudden, something touched my foot. I don't remember if it grabbed my foot or what, but the screen ripped, the curtain fell, and I scrambled off the bed and out of my bedroom into the living room where Mom was. She had heard the commotion and saw that I was frightened. She asked me what was wrong, so I told her what had happened. She went into my bedroom and saw the hole in the screen and that the curtain was down. She also saw how it was hanging halfway out the window. She didn't know what to think, so she called Dad home from work. He came home to check it out and walked around the house before coming in. He said he hadn't seen anything. At first, he didn't believe Mom. It wasn't until he saw that the curtain was hanging out the window that he believed her. He couldn't figure it out. We didn't have any problems with Prowers. At first, they thought I had stuck my foot through the screen. I don't think that's what happened because I wasn't sleeping yet. I just couldn't have done that. Encounter number 2, Navajo County, Arizona. While scanning the valley floor for sheep a mile from my house, I noticed 2 loping figures. Initially, I thought the figures were coyotes or stray dogs, but as the 2 figures neared an old sunken vehicle, I realized that the things were about the size of the vehicle, nearly 8 feet long. No animal could be that big on the res. I watched the 2 figures until they disappeared in the woods across the valley. It was starting to get dark, but the moon was bright enough, so I walked without a light. As I walked down the mountain, I heard something yelling. It was like a howl or a yell. I started to hurry. Then when I got to my house, I locked the door and spent the night listening to the strangest sounds. I'm sure it was a skinwalker, but I found this sight and was surprised. Encounter number 3, Cochise County, Arizona. I was 17 years old at the time. My dad and mom had taken my little brother and sister to Tucson to do something for the day. We lived in a trailer in a rural area outside of Sierra Vista. We had 2 horses, 2 dogs, a cow, and chickens on the small amount of land we owned. As the oldest son, it was my job to feed and take care of them. On the night in question, it was a stormy monsoon rain with thunder and lightning going on. But like monsoons can be, they rage and then settle into a lull and rage again. I was getting ready to settle down and watch a good movie when all of a sudden my 2 dogs started barking and wouldn't shut up when I told them to calm down. In the previous week or so before that, my dogs had been acting up and barking a lot at night. I attributed this to coyotes that I'd heard howling in the night, so I got my dad's .30-30 and just one bullet, in case I had to shoot to scare off a coyote or kill it if rabid. I rested the loaded rifle near the wall by the back door and turned on the floodlights outside the trailer. The rain had just stopped, so I looked out the window near the front door and saw our 2 horses and cows staring, as if through the front door to the back door of the trailer where the dogs were barking. I thought, maybe they're scared of the coyotes, so I grabbed the rifle and opened up the back door. As I was getting near the back door, I heard my dogs whimpering and crying. Now I was thinking, is it a pack of coyotes? So I put a few bullets in my pocket, figuring I could load them if I didn't like what I saw. I opened the door and the darndest thing happened. My 2 dogs beelined, rushed past me to the center of the trailer and hunkered down in the kitchen. Mud was everywhere on the floor from their paws, and I was pissed because I knew I'd have to clean it up. So I closed the door and went to try to get my dogs to get out, but they wouldn't budge and squirmed out of my arms when I tried to grab them. They were terrified. Now I was mad at the coyotes and grabbed the rifle to go run them off or kill them. The trailer sits on a foundation of blocks. The front and back doors are accessible by a set of small stairs. I'm 5'6", by the way. I opened the back door and was looking out into the darkness at that point. I was about to step out when I saw a set of eyes looking back at me out of the darkness. From the top of my head in the trailer to the ground is about 7+ feet or so. And here's a set of eyes looking at me level and square on. I was like, darn coyote must be on the small gravel hill we used to pave the road, or it's bird on a mesquite bush. But I was thinking to myself, that monsoon was awfully bad and rained hard. What kind of bird would hunker down on a mesquite bush, and why would a coyote be out in a downpour? So I raised my rifle and drew a bead on the eyes when lightning lit up the night. All of a sudden, the lightning illuminated the small gravel hill that's like 6 feet high and the surrounding mesquite bushes. The light winks out as fast as it appeared from the lightning, though. There was nothing on the gravel hill and no bird on any of the mesquite bushes. Then it dawned on me. Whatever it was very tall, and it was still staring at me. A sense of dread crept over me all of a sudden as I remembered and realized that the .30-30 only had 1 measly bullet, and if I missed, there was no way I'd be able to reload before it was on me. I kept the gun pointed at it. As I quickly closed the door, I locked the door, realizing this trailer would never withstand what was out there if attacked. I locked the front door and turned on all of the lights in the house. I grabbed all the bullets, the .30-06 and .22 rifle, and then went into the kitchen with the dogs. I then loaded each rifle full on. I hugged my dogs and prayed that whatever it was would go away and not attack. I stayed awake that whole night until my parents got back. My dad was furious that all the lights were on. My dad checked outside for coyotes, but whatever it was gone. Encounter number 4. Sacramento County, California. The encounter I'd like to share is not my own, but that of my mother's. She used to tell me stories when I was young about strange things she had experienced in her life. I remember this Dogman type of encounter, and there's not particularly a lot of detail to this encounter, but what you may find interesting is the location. The sighting took place in Sacramento, California around 1953, not too far from our state's capital. Using Google Maps to get an approximate location and lay of the land, I can see the sighting area was about 1,000 feet to the west of and perpendicular to the American River. Across the river from the east bank, it's only about another 2,000 feet east to the state capital, so this took place fairly close to a heavily populated area. My mother states she was about 12 years old and she was lying on the couch watching television. That's when she noticed a scary dog face looking at her through a low-pane window. The window was either on or by the door. I'm unclear on this fact. In any event, the head, she said, must have been about 2 to 2.5 feet above the ground. She covered her face in fright with her pillow. After a minute or so, she snuck a peek, figuring she must be imagining things. She saw it was gone and felt a little bit better. Then she noticed it was now looking through another higher window. Its head was now about 4 to 4.5 feet above the ground. According to her recollection, there was nothing outside that window for a dog to stand on. At that point, she just ran to another room in terror. She doesn't really recall what happened after that. She describes the animal as being dark gray with glowing red eyes, seemingly panting or baring its teeth. She didn't see the body, but had the impression that it was thin. Unfortunately, she doesn't recall the time of day, month, or season. My parents tell me there's likely some Native American burial grounds in the area, as there had been excavations near the river which yielded arrowheads and other artifacts. I know it's been mentioned in some of the encounters you presented, proximity to rivers and Native American burial grounds. I even asked my mother if there were cornfields around the area, since that too has been mentioned in the encounters. She said only the small patch of corn stalks in their own backyard. I don't think that qualifies. The area around my grandparents' house was not really wooded. The neighborhood was mostly large fields with a few horses and some cattle. The areas around the river are wooded now, though, and was probably a lot more so in 1953 than it is today. Encounter number 5, San Mateo County, California. On August 27, 2016, my 10-year-old grandson was sitting in a car at a restaurant parking lot, waiting for his grandmother. Across the street from him on a sidewalk, he noticed a large creature, which I determined to be 7 to 8 feet tall, from talking with him. It was walking on 2 legs toward a wooded area at the end of a sidewalk and disappeared into some brush. The creature did not appear concerned about my grandson, as it was in no hurry. When I asked him about what he had seen, he described a classic canine-type dogman with red eyes. His distance from creature was approximately 30 feet. Daly City is semi-rural with many pockets of woodlands and some tracts of forest. The area where he saw the creature had paved roads and sidewalks ringed with areas of trees. Encounter number 6, Prowers County, Colorado. Well, I'm 24 years old, male, and live in the middle of nowhere, literally. I'll be short and simple about my encounter. I was getting home late one day after dropping my sister off at the airport in Lamar, Colorado. I live just under 7 miles north of the Oklahoma border on 250 acres of land. I have a trap line running around my property for coyotes. The first 2 traps I checked were empty, so I headed south. That's when I saw this thing. At first I thought it was a coyote, a big coyote. It was almost 5 feet tall on all 4s. It was caught in my trap and was running around making a dust cloud, and then it stopped and looked at me. Now I use a Duke No. 3 leg hold trap so I can catch a variety of things in it. Anyway, I slammed on the brakes and my truck stalled because it's a manual. I was fumbling for the keys to start it. It's an old farm truck with a carburetor on it and it had quite an afterfire. Once I heard that, it lunged at me and roared. I saw that it had its hand, not paw, but a hand, caught in my trap, right hand to be exact. It'd probably been looking for the dead rabbit I had in the bait hole next to the trap. It then stood up and ripped the 2 earth anchors I had, 24 inches in the ground, right out. It took me a long time to put them in with a 10-pound hammer, but it pulled them straight out within 15 seconds. After it did that, it just stood there looking at me. It felt like an eternity, and I knew my .357 would do nothing to stop this thing if it came at me. I prayed to God that it wouldn't come for me in my truck. I was looking at it in shock and awe and noticed that it had orange eyes. They weren't glowing. Instead, they had a tint like a cat's eyes in the dark. They might have been reflecting my headlights. I can't be sure. It then took a step toward me, curled up its upper lip, and showing me its teeth. They were huge. The longest 2 had to have been 4 to 5 inches long. It then growled at me, and then it was gone in the blink of an eye. I was scared then. I jammed the truck into gear and spun the tires, getting out of Dodge. Like I said earlier, it seemed like an eternity, but it must have lasted no more than 30 seconds at the max. I later returned with an Indian friend of mine. He is a part Arapaho. I grew up with him and trusted him. He told me some stories that were passed down through his grandparents' tribe and mentioned something about a loup-garou or French werewolf. He also told me how fur trappers in the late 1700s to 1800s were chased off the land in the Rockies from this thing. After some research online, I found you, and here I am. I really am glad you made this for people to tell their story of what they encountered. I used to work until about 10 to 11 at night, but I sleep with the lights on now. It sounds silly for a 24-year-old to be doing this, but to be honest, I'm still frightened by this thing. I haven't bothered going out for my lost trap because I'll bet the thing has torn it apart by now. Encounter number 7, Leon County, Florida. Okay, I'm sharing this story in hopes of someone else having another one, and then I will have this one out in the open. I was traveling Highway 10 from the west coast to the south coast of Florida. I was with my 6 kids and pulling a trailer with all my belongings and 3 dogs in it. I was in a big SUV and it was around 2 a.m. The kids were all asleep and my 13-year-old daughter was in the passenger seat to make sure I stayed awake. So after traveling Highway 10 for 3 days, I had decided since we reached Florida, we would cut through the state to save some time. So we got off Highway 10 on an off-road in hopes of getting gas and making up some time. It was about Route 27, Apalachicola National Forest. We came to the first little gas station. It was closed, and I was nervous because we needed gas, so we continued on. I told my daughter to keep an eye out for deer crossing the two-lane deserted highway, because hitting a deer could kill us all and turn us over due to the trailer we were pulling. We were traveling around 45 miles an hour, and I remember this so clearly like it was yesterday, but it was 3 years ago. We got our brights on because the road was dark and winding. A few houses were on that highway, but not many. As we came around a corner in the headlights on the road, there was a lot of blood, fresh blood, and on the side of the road was this 6 or 7 foot tall creature. It was on its hind legs, hunched over a dead deer, eating it. It did not look up, not even when my headlights hit it. It was using its arms like a human, eating the deer. It had a very muscular body, pointed ears, and a long muzzle. If you ever saw a werewolf, this was it. It had a skinnier lower body, but used its arms and hands just like a human. If it looked up, I would have died. I looked over at my daughter. We were both seeing the same thing at the same time. Tears came to my eyes instantly, and at the same time we both said, "Werewolf!" I sped up because I was scared it would have run and jumped on the trailer and killed my dogs. As we got about a mile away, my heart was beating so hard. My daughter and I were so freaked out. It was a werewolf. I've never been a believer in werewolves. I don't watch any werewolf movies or have any reason to make this up. And as a matter of fact, until today, I've only told a handful of people about this. There is a werewolf in Florida. Not sure of the exact town or road, but I wish I did know, so I could find out if we were the only ones to have seen this thing. I will live my life wondering. It was behind Alabama to Florida, along the Panhandle. I'll never forget this night ever. Encounter number 8, Polk County, Florida. Okay, so I'm just going to start off by saying that this isn't my personal encounter. This happened to my mother and uncle when they were children. I know that the 3 encounters that were shared with me in rich detail have all been in the years that ended with a 7. That in no way is referencing the song by Steve Cook. The encounter I'm about to tell you happened in Lakeland, Florida in 1977. My mom was 6 and my uncle was a few years younger than her. My grandparents were passing through and a friend of theirs let them spend the night in a vacant house that their friends owned. I'm guessing this was in the spring or summer because the windows were wide open with bug screens on the windows. My grandmother was out in the front of the house taking care of my youngest uncle, who was still a baby. My grandfather was reportedly using the bathroom at the time, and my mom and uncle were in a back room playing. She said that the window that was in the room was very high. Imagine that the windows would be in a basement, except this was an upper floor window. If you were outside, the window would be about 10 to 12 feet off the ground, so the window was pretty high. My mom said that as she and my uncle were playing, a huge hairy paw with long claws reached up to the window and grabbed the screen. It then dragged its claws down diagonally across the screen. Needless to say, they were scared. They thought it was my grandfather just playing a cruel prank on them. So they barged out of the room and headed straight to the front of the house. They found my grandmother and demanded to know where my grandfather was. She said that he was in the bathroom, but the two of them didn't believe her. So they marched to the bathroom, opened the door, and when they did, there was my grandfather. The window in the bathroom was similar to that of the room that the two had been in, so in all honesty, he wouldn't have had the time to climb out of the window, climb back up, and get back on the toilet. My grandparents were both thinking that the two of them were just freaking out about nothing at the time. Grandma said she remembered the pair being horrified, though. So they went out the next morning, and what do you know? There were scratches on the outside wall of the house, and the window screen was torn out. Encounter number 9. Sarasota County, Florida. I'm from Northport, Florida. We have a 12-mile reserve called Carlton Reserve. I was out there messing around with some friends, and they went off ahead of me to go mudding. I was at a tree line taking a leak in the marshy field in front of me, and I noticed a figure in the field. He was very coyote-like. He was tannish gray in color and very lanky and tall. He was crouched over eating a boar. I got the bright idea to yell, so I did. As I did, his ears perked up, and I realized what I was looking at. He must not have seen me because he looked around for a little and continued to eat. The whole encounter lasted about 5 minutes. I'm not sure what I saw, but it was something I've never seen before, and I've been living here for 16 years, my whole life. Encounter number 10, Habersham County, Georgia. This took place 3 weeks ago while driving home from an event with my fiancée. It was already dark out and was raining when we hit the road this night. I myself was driving and my fiancée was in the passenger seat. We had been driving about 15 minutes at most when we got to a part of the road where I noticed a rather large figure in the opposite lane of the two-way road we were on. It seemed to be on all fours and was grayish in color. It was very quick, which was startling given the conditions. I asked my fiancée if she had seen it. She said yes, but seemed spooked about it. I wanted to stop, but couldn't because there was another car about 100 feet behind us. I also didn't look back because I wanted to stay focused on the road because of the poor conditions and the fact that we were in an area we had never been in until that night. I truly don't think it was a cow from what I saw, even with the fleeting glimpse I had of it. Its hair was more canine-like than anything. I'd have to conclude that it was a Dogman or a Bigfoot. I definitely wish I would have been able to get a longer look at it during the daytime. It was within feet of my door, but it happened so quickly, and the fact that I kept my focus on the road instead of turning to look at it, I didn't see it clearly. Encounter number 11, Fannin County, Georgia. My wife and I fall on hard times, and we're living with her mom and her husband on Colville Road. I grew up just 2 miles from here, and I always loved going into the woods and still do today. The Cahuta National Forest was my playground growing up. It was not unheard of for me to disappear for a few days into the woods. On the day in question, my wife, her mother, and I went shopping and were coming home on Highway 2. We were in my dad's F-150 with a brush guard on the front. It was very dark and foggy that night with Jack's River on our left, about 10 yards off the road. We were about 250 yards from Colwell, and there was a very sharp curve to the right. When I took that curve, there was something in the road. It was on all fours. I had no choice but to hit it. When we connected, the truck went completely over it. We felt the go thunk over the animal, and I stopped to make sure the animal was dead. I did not want it to suffer and to check the truck as well. The truck was okay, but when I looked at the crash, it was strange. So I got back in the truck, turned it around so I would have the headlights to see from. That was the darndest thing I'd ever seen. It was black, but it was not a regular black. It was like it absorbed the light, like no light going past it. And I still couldn't make out the animal. What I was about to make out, it was about 200 and 250 pounds. It was clearly dead. The head was twisted back. I believe that the truck went over its neck and broke its neck, and the eyes were blue but glassy, the way eyes turn when something's dead. It had long curved claws. The teeth were all curved back and sharp. I did not want to freak out the girls, so we went home, about 1.5 miles to 2 miles from there. The next morning I grabbed my .30-30 and my .357 to go take a look. It was gone. I mean nothing. There was no blood, no fur, but here was the impression in the grass where it was last night, and it looked like something big came along. A car had carried it off in the woods or something. I could see where something walked into the woods, so I went back to the truck and got my trekking bag. Just had a tarp, wool blanket, 2 quarts of water, and a little bit of food. Just enough stuff to make a night or two in the woods, just a camping trip and not a survival situation. And I headed into the woods to track whatever this thing was. I never saw a clear track, just a sign, a broken stick here, leaves turned over, rocks that were disturbed from here and there, and that kind of stuff. I tracked it about 2 miles to a field about half a football field inside. Right to the middle of that field, and all signs disappeared. I went all over that field and its perimeter, and there was no sign of it coming out of the field, just going in. That stumped me, so I gave up and started back to the truck. But when I got to the edge of the field, I got a very bad feeling in my gut. I couldn't explain it any other way. It was so bad that it almost doubled me over. After a short while of collecting myself, I tried to head back to the truck again, but it was the same thing. I know about where I was in comparison to the roads in the area, so I headed in the opposite direction toward a friend's house about 5 miles away. I finally got out of the woods just before dark, and I told my friend about what happened, and he told me never to go to that field again. It's supposed to be cursed, and that people have gone missing after going to that field. I don't know what I saw that night, and I don't know if the legend of the field is true, but I do believe there is something strange in the woods. The woods are a part of me, and I can never stay out of the woods, and I am not afraid of anything in the woods. I would just want to be careful around one of those things, like I would be around a bear. Encounter number 12, Idaho County, Idaho. I saw a Dogman walking around along the green belt in Boise, Idaho, and to be more specific, the area would be Garden City. The actual location on the green belt would be the area of the green belt that is just on the other side of Veterans Parkway Bridge. For those not familiar with the area, the Boise River flows through downtown Boise and Garden City. The green belt is a walking, biking pathway that is paved that goes right next to the river. It's 3:15 in the morning in February of 2008. I was scraping the ice off my car window. I had to be at work at 4 a.m. I realized it was eerily quiet, and I looked up and I saw it walking along the green belt, going towards the Veterans Parkway Bridge. The bridge goes over the Boise River, and the green belt pathway goes under the bridge. It was tall, I guess around 7 feet. It turned its head and looked at me. It had green, neon-colored glowing eyes. I said, "Oh my goodness." It turned its head back and continued walking along the green belt. It was walking slowly. I was frozen with fear and didn't move until I saw it vanish behind the building that's next to the Veterans Parkway Bridge. I assumed that it continued along the green belt under the bridge. It had dark brown fur all over its body. Pointed ears, long snout, weird legs, a tail. I got a pretty good look at it. That section of the green belt is at the end of a dead-end street and has a couple of businesses there with parking lots that are all lit up with streetlights. I only saw it that one time. Encounter number 13, Minidoka County, Idaho. I wasn't there, but my son, son-in-law, and their friends saw a Dogman. My son called me all freaked out that they had seen a Bigfoot because he knows I believe in Bigfoots. Now, my son always made fun of me for believing in Bigfoots. He asked me, "Dad, can Bigfoots run on all fours?" I said, "Yes." "Why do you ask?" And he said, "Dad, we just saw one while out spotlighting rabbits." I asked him to describe what it looked like, and he said they were hunting rabbits with a spotlight, and he saw something hunched over. He said he then yelled to the others and let them know that he'd seen something, and then started to shine his light on it. At first he thought it was a very large bird because it was down like it was eating something. Then it stood up on its hind legs and spread its arms out wide, and when other two came to look at it, it dropped down and took off faster than anything they had ever seen before. He said it had a dog snout and was covered in fur, but you could see it was very muscular. My son is 6'2", and he felt like it stood as tall or taller than him. And when it took off, they ran after it and watched it jump and clear a huge rock pile in one leap like nothing. That scared them, and they all ran back to their car to get out of there. I spoke to all three, and they all had the same story and described it the same way. I told my son that's not a Bigfoot because Bigfoots don't have dog snouts. I told him you saw a Dogman, and it's funny that this happened around a lot of cornfields. The area also had caves and was covered in sagebrush.